Starting off with the Cowboys right away, we did have a pretty major trade deadline, like we have have said already on this podcast. Cowboys made two trades on the defensive side, getting Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets, few-time Pro Bowler for them, had defensive MVP considerations just a few years ago for the AFC, I believe. And that was for a first round pick in 2027 and also a second round pick. Also sending Mozzie Smith to New York. Kind of
How
going
they use that guy to get out of here is
addition
crazy.
by subtraction right there. And then then also the lesser trade, but still pretty important as probably the Cowboys have the worst linebacking crew in the whole entire league right now, trading for Logan Wilson from Cincinnati for a seventh round pick. Joe, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you like this trade deadline? Do you think it was a good one, or do you think it's a laughable trade deadline like a few people, not just a few, a lot of people are saying?
I think it's okay. I don't know if it's a laugher, honestly. I like the Quentin Williams move. The problem is you don't get anybody in your secondary. And it doesn't matter how dominant of an interior player he is. You can have a Kenny Clark and a Quentin Williams up the middle. I mean, you can work your way around that as an offense. You can work around a dominant interior. We've seen good run Ds that have awful pass Ds. It's not impossible. So the fact that they didn't really get any help for the secondary is kind of interesting. I was not expecting that. Kyer Elam, Deron Bland, Trey Diggs, atrocious this year. It's been really
Terrible.
bad, really bad. Deron Bland, since getting that money, I know he got a pick six against Washington again. Since he got that contract, it has just been embarrassing. Troy Aikman had to laugh at one of those plays that he had against Marvin Harrison that eventually he scored on. It was a joke of a performance from that defense yet again against Arizona on Monday night. It's just weird to me how Cincinnati's defense is really the only one that's worse than Dallas's. Somehow there's a defense worse than the Cowboys this year.
Hard to
And
believe.
that guy, yeah, and that guy got benched by them. He got benched by the Bengals, and the Cowboys say, we'll trade for him. Just interesting how that works. I don't know how that got navigated. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. Maybe he can be back to that Super Bowl level we saw in 2021, where he was on that team and that sneaky good defense of the Bengals with Lou Anarumo, who's now the Colts DC. That sneaky good defense that made a run and had 9 sacks against Tennessee. Maybe he finds a way to get back in that right foot. I don't see it though with this defense. The system is just god awful. I don't know how Logan Wilson's going to play with this team. I like Quinnen Williams, but I just don't know how far he can go with such a poor secondary that the Cowboys have.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a really poor secondary that the Cowboys have. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of more on the positive side on this kind of situation. I like that they were able to, of course they gave up some serious draft capital. I would say it's about a 7 out of 10 for me, to be honest. I would say it's a little bit higher. I mean, to me, it's just doing something aggressive. It feels just a tad refreshing. Not just a tad, it feels pretty refreshing as a Cowboys fan. We know that this is something that Jerry Jones kind of has trouble doing. The last time that I could think of uh, a ballsy trade that he did, other than George Pickens, would be Amari Cooper, all the way back to 2018. And so also they have not signed anyone over 6 million on an annual average value in the free agency since 2015 or 2014, I believe, which was Greg Hardy. Good old Greg
Wow.
Hardy. And so, if we're going to be aggressive, it might as well be in the trade deadline where we know that there has been at least some kind of history of the Cowboys being aggressive because they aren't going to be aggressive in free agency. And this team needs change. This team is not good enough to compete, and we're wasting a top offense right now. So Quentin Williams, it's not just like we're getting him as a rental. This guy is supposed to be a part of the future of the Cowboys defense now. And of course, you mentioned, does suck it does suck to not upgrade the secondary yet. But the good thing is that it takes a 2027 first round draft pick for Quentin Williams. You don't have to trade any draft capital from this year, I believe. Do you know what the year the second round pick is? It was 2026, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I don't even think it's this year. And so you still have your draft capital. You still have the first round pick from the Packers. Good thing that they lost to the Panthers this weekend, so it helps our draft capital just a tad, just a tad. It's still going to be in the 20s. 90% likely that it's going to be in the 20s, more than 90%. But, you still, you're getting you have good draft capital for next year or this next upcoming draft who has a lot of good defensive players. I'll be honest, I don't know too much about the secondary though, but I do know that there are some good defensive players coming up in this draft. And, that's where the Cowboys need to rebuild. They need to rebuild through the draft. They're not going to rebuild through free agency and getting this kind of head start going into next season because I think this season is a waste. I think this is a dud. They're not going to go anywhere. I've been thinking that since the Chicago game. But you can't just waste an offense like this, and I'm glad that they're trying to do something.
And here you have the Eagles, kind of sitting pretty at first in the NFC East, still making trades. I mean, we see this every year with Howie Roseman, getting Jalen Phillips, getting Jair Alexander. He's not that all-pro level he used to be, but of course, I bet he's going to show up and show out when he goes to Philadelphia. Might get a big pick in the postseason, who knows? And they also get Michael Carter the second. They still are making deals. Good teams do what good teams do, basically, in Howie Roseman. They didn't deal A.J. Brown, which some people thought they would. I didn't really think he had a chance of going, and so it is interesting that he's still there amidst all like the complaints that he does not get his fair share of targets. But a win is a win. That's all that matters in the NFL. Sometimes guys want to get their money here and there, but Howie Roseman keeps on putting a masterclass, or at least somewhat of a competitive feel on the trade deadline every single time. So it's interesting to see that Jerry Jones is at least trying, like you were saying. I don't want to act like he didn't put an effort. He made an effort, and I give him props for that. I just don't know how far it can actually affect this team because it does feel like at this point in the season, if you can't beat the Arizona Cardinals, man, with Jacoby Brissett starting, like, what are we doing? If of all things, I didn't think the offense was going to have such a poor performance like they did. But the Cardinals really just own Dallas as of late. It's just unreal how we. I haven't seen the Cardinals beat them since Carson Palmer. I haven't seen the Cowboys beat the Cardinals since Carson Palmer was in Arizona, and that was Dak's second year, by the way. It's ridiculous.
No, it's pretty ridiculous. And this time they didn't even have Kyler Murray. It was Jacoby Brissett who
Yeah,
just diced our entire defense. We were able to get some pressure on him at times, but he still operated pretty efficiently. The offensive line for the Cowboys, moving back to the offense, really struggled this game. And it definitely caused a lot of disruption for Dak, and for this offense. The inefficiency, the crucial spots, talking about the fourth down at the start of the game, failing to convert on that. Javonte Williams wasn't as effective. Of course, they were playing down the entire time, so it's hard to kind of go and kind of depend on your running back when you're down by at least two scores throughout majority of the game. I'll say that, other than the fact that George Pickens didn't do much, you gotta like that Ryan Flournoy, he stayed involved throughout the game, had a crucial touchdown play in the second half, had a good route right there. I mean, it's just digging themselves too much of a hole. They've done this with Arizona so many times, and they do it, frankly, all the time. They just dig themselves too much of a hole in the first half. They haven't been able to rebound at times. I think of, they try to make these comeback attempts a good amount of times, but their defense in their first half kind of performances have just been just a little inconsistent at times. Obviously, the fence defense is just terrible, of course, but
I
um,
almost hate that they get a sack on first down because I feel like that almost helps the offense. They're just gonna pass the ball, and we know how this pass defense looks. And we saw, I believe,
the run defense wasn't
um,
any better either. Over
we
100
saw.
yards again.
I called it immediately when Dante Fowler got that sack on like first down, I believe, in the end of the third quarter, beginning of fourth quarter. Next play, Trey McBride right up the seam. They get like the first down, I believe, at least very short of the first down marker. The next play, and it's like, I mean, it's like a sack just helps them, helps offenses, because if you just pass against this Cowboys defense, you're going to be so successful. We've seen teams look like they're about to that they have like Tom Brady at quarterback. It's just unreal. Jacoby Brissett is a career journeyman. And he's been going from team to team, and he's kind of beat out Kyler Murray for this job now. He's going to start this next game for Arizona, and Jonathan Gannon has had enough. But just embarrassing effort on Monday. It's a shame that it ended up this way because this team could have been sitting at 4-4-1 after a game that we thought was going to be a surefire win. Very
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, and hopefully, again, the trade deadline moves, specifically Quentin Williams, maybe that just generating more pressure. Of course, he's going to be more of a, we're going to need him for run stopping as well, but just generating pressure, more pressure to make it easier for the defensive backs. But the Cowboys didn't really struggle too much, too much. They still struggled at times throughout the game of generating pressure on Jacoby Brissett, but you say wish that you could be 4-4-1 if you really, really want to make the playoffs this year. 3-5-1 just looks so ugly of a record, first of all. Second of all, the upcoming schedule, just very, very tough. You have the coming off the bye week, you do have a Monday Night Football game against the Raiders, but then you go into three games almost in 10 days, three games in 11 days, and those are against the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles, play Thanksgiving against the Chiefs. Then you play Thursday Night Football the week after on the road against the Lions. It doesn't really get too much easier after that. You play the Vikings and Chargers. I mean, what kind of record do you see from this team, right? Do you see a record? I mean,
I want to have some hope, man, but it's starting to look just ugly. I hope this defense can just be somewhat mid. Just be mid. And let the offense just find a way to stay more consistent because they've kind of waned these last two games. I thought the offense could be relied on going into the Denver game more than they were, but they've been shut down really the past two games. I can see this team really capping at 7 wins, if I'm being honest. Capping, that's their ceiling.
go about four and
Um,
four.
yeah, to end the year. It's
They're
hard for
just
me to
not
think.
consistent enough.
It's hard for me to think that they get hot. And if they get hot, it's going to be because the defense finds a way to just improve, which it feels like they have a long way to get to. But I don't know if these trades move the needle for them like that because the offense I can trust at least somewhat, albeit they've had some struggles the last two games. But the defense, I can't trust them at all. They can't tackle in open space. They let up way too many third down conversions. They can't finish a play. The pass rush is just weak. Hopefully, Quentin Williams can have that kind of impact, but they can offenses can work around that.
And they're decently undisciplined, which is something that the Cowboys seem to always struggle with, even with their greater teams. Teams that won 12 games in a season just a few years back. I would
Hmm.
say this is probably about yeah, 4-4 sounds right. Maybe I'm being wishful thinking, but I think that they can come away with a few wins here. I think that, you have a lot of home matchups in this tough schedule. And although we had a terrible home game against Arizona this past weekend, statistics show that this team is much better at home. I think that that was kind of a fluke. The Cardinals seem to be sort of our kryptonite in a sense. And so, you have Washington, LA, the Chargers, and the Vikings all at home in December. I think that you have a chance to win two out of three there. You should be able to pick up that win against the really injured Giants team at the end of the season. And I'm gonna go 5-3 and just make it funny. This is an 8-8-1 season. All right, this is just straight up 8-8-1 season. One of the best offenses in the league, and the defense just drowns it all out and makes it just completely mediocre. Once again, very fitting for this team.
Yeah, I can see that. It can happen. But they're lucky. I don't mean to have this come off the wrong way, but they're lucky. Jaden Daniels had such an awful injury that he'd had a few days ago, and that he's kind of cast off to the side. And they have to play Marcus Mariota, who they fared well against the last matchup in Dallas. So that's possibly something out of the way that Dallas doesn't have to worry about. But yeah, that upcoming schedule, the Chiefs on Thanksgiving, well, that's going to be a spectacle. We even faced the Chiefs. The Cowboys haven't faced the Chiefs at AT&T since I believe the Alex Smith era, like the last year of Alex Smith. I remember that if I remember that correctly, and feels like that was ages ago when Tyreek Hill and Mahomes and Mahomes was still backing up Alex Smith at the time, and Travis Kelce was still unquestionably a top three tight end ages ago. But now here we are, and Thanksgiving coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, and it's looking like a sure loss, but